given the current COVID pandemic and the crisis which has come about as a result of that, one of the thoughts is that the shape of work post-COVID is definitely going to change. Around how do you see this shape up post the lockdown is lifted? And what are the lessons or learning that we have from the past which can help figure out what the future could look like?
Actually, I have a question for both of you. So you've chosen this time for both of you to start on new assignments. So what is the thought behind it?
So I think for me, I've had 26 years of big corporate career. Working with big corporates is always, rich from a point of view of gaining experience, but then what you do or what you don't do has to be governed by a corporate entity. So I think for me, it was all about a little bit of creativity, taking risk, and believing and trying things that I believe can leapfrog in terms of value addition want to do, whether it's HR or even outside HR. So this was a very thought out, a few month old decision with support from mentors. Going into an investing job without having that level of experience can be a little intimidating as well. But, honestly, it's been exhilarating. I have worked so hard, Gautam, right now that I have never done this in my life as much. When I say work hard, I am brushing up my financial fundas on investing. I do a tech course because some of the investments we're making are in tech. And I'm not a techie, but I'm trying really hard to, learn. And I've realized that how difficult it is to unlearn and relearn at my age, but nevertheless, I'm enjoying that journey. I've kind of given myself a certain amount of time to be able to create, deploy, and have some meaningful returns, not just financially, but more also, feeling emotionally about, strongly about what we're doing is good. So whether we've launched the recent Women in Tech Forum, which some of you've seen, or we are doing, a coaching online launch, which will be done by June. So for me, it was, making a choice when there is so much uncertainty, which was starting to brew up in my mind. It just manifested itself outside thanks to COVID. When nothing is certain, let's say anything is possible. And I wanted to exploit those possibilities.
Yeah, in my case, probably a little bit of a trigger was from what I was doing earlier. So I was working very closely with startups on a startup ecosystem. One of the things that I realized is that startups need help in multiple areas. And the ability to provide help in those areas is probably best done when you are independent and you don't have constraints within which you need to operate. So that was one thought process. Second is, I have been in management consulting for many years. This is probably my 7th profession. And I keep joking with Gautam saying that I don't know how many professions I would cover in my lifetime, but it is one life and, you have so many different things that you can do. So that's the bug which keeps biting me very frequently. Can I prune down my life and live it in a very different template or format is also the exploration that I'm doing right now. And I don't know, maybe in a few months, I will move to a very small location. It could be Goa, it could be some other beachside location, and try and see if I can work from there. So those are the kind of explorations which drove me to taking the plunge right now.
So Gautam, I have a question for you now. You've been such a big influencer on social media, and tell us, how did you take this unique decision?
I don't know. I don't think much. I think that's both a strength and a weakness. In 2006, when I left Deloitte to start off, it was just primarily driven by instinct, saying, if I don't do this now, I will regret this later. Overall, the whole thing guiding me was there's this big change happening in which institutions and organizations are going to change. The internet is not a medium like TV, radio, newspapers. It's something very fundamentally different. Earlier, only media was different. Then we saw it actually impacting real life goods and services the whole sharing economy, then the whole evolution of gig economy, somewhere this whole disintermediation power, I somehow sensed it. I couldn't articulate it very properly, but I knew that, I had to be a part of it in some way.
So I think that kind of, Debu, brings a certain commonality amongst the three of us. We've all kind of thought maybe little or none and jumped into something which we feel quite passionately about. So wonderful to join both of you in this journey.
I've been seeing people on Twitter and social media complaining about how they are working far more now in the lockdown than they had when they were actually going to office. But that's not true for everybody who works. This is a typical problem of knowledge workers. Because the lack of measurement of a productive day is a health hazard that has been inflicting the knowledge workers all the while, because we don't know how to define a productive day. It's measured probably by the number of hours we work. But it's not true for the blue-collared workers. They don't have a constraint or an issue like that. So
yeah, actually, I remember an old article that says that knowledge work is never completed. It is abandoned at the end of the day to be picked up the next day.
that's right.
And it contrasted it with saying, somebody who paints a sign of, say, in front of a park can say when his work is done, when he's painted the sign. But I think the other aspect of this whole work from home and feeling overworked is also, I think, it's mostly people are new into it. They've been dunked without any preparation. I think the whole aspect of doing everything on a video call is also stressful because video calls need a lot more concentration and time than a face-to-face conversation where your eyes can wander, but you would still get the overall meaning of what the person is doing.
So in my head now, we have BC and AD. And I think going forward, BC is before COVID, and hopefully AD will be after death of COVID. So if you correlate work from home, BC, it was like optional. I have seen different patterns about working from home depending on which geography you're in. And I found, I don't mean this as a criticism, but in India somehow, people being in office was considered more effective and efficient. And maybe I was in the same camp, let me be candid. And the reason was that working from home meant in between, there were times you would take the liberty to do groceries or you would do housework and all of that stuff. And employers were of the view that if you're working 9 to 6, then you ought to be working for the employer. I think it's changed on two counts. One is it's a necessity now to work from home. It's not a choice which we made. It's been imposed on us. Second is the discipline and the work ethics of work from home have to be learned. But it's stressful because we've been forced into it. We haven't been eased into it. Now the question is, would there be an option to being eased into it? I don't think so. My sense is that over the next few months, this will become easier and better. And finally, eventually, we'll land up in a blended model where you will be in and out of office, but you will certainly have a large chunk of your workforce which is remote.
It's also changing things at home itself. Some lady tweeting, I didn't know I was married to a guy who uses the phrase, let's touch base later on. People are discovering how your spouse is talking. Somebody yesterday actually also shared saying, do you think it's a invasion of privacy, this whole video conferencing, because now you can see people's homes. I don't know how it will impact relationships, office relationships going forward, but I think people will see people more than just roles and more as individuals that they are.
See, the most famous example of this working from home is the BBC man,
Right.
interview and his kids walked into the room. See, nobody looked at it as a, unprofessional act. It was cute. It was very humane. The office was created largely for creating records. So you scribed, classified stuff, and then you stored it also. And that's where the origin of office came from. And interestingly, the office has been a very recent development. So 18th century, not earlier than that. The other interesting thing which I found out was that, the separation of office from the factories happened only after the, advent of telecommunication. So you move the offices away from the manufacturing, and that was as recent as 1960s. Work from home was the only way to work prior to the 18th century. So saying that, this is a disruption is probably overthinking it. And we also probably are looking at this from the lens of knowledge workers alone. If I were to go and ask a blue-collared worker, I don't think they would even understand the conversation that we are having. And knowledge workers are most prevalent on social media, so that's what gets amplified the most. But the notion of work and the need for office is probably overstated. And I wanted to, use this slot to put forth a couple of crazy ideas which came from this topic. One is that for knowledge workers, is there a way of having a workload indicator embedded into an email software? I'm writing to somebody, can you? The moment I sense can you, I ask for an estimate of how long will it take the person whom you're requesting this activity of, how much time will it take of them? So at the end of the day, the individual starts getting a feel of how much of time they need to spend on work. So some kind of an AI or a bot which does the estimate and stacks it up for a day, saying that I don't think you should accept any more tasks from your boss or your colleagues for this particular day. Why does it bother us that we are not in an office? So if I created a Zoom link or a meeting link and kept it live where anybody could drop in whenever they felt like it, and it was live all the time, it would be like exactly like I was in my cubicle or in my meeting room. People could pop in and pop out, and I could keep myself some time where people couldn't pop in, and even 3 to 4 people or 6 people could pop in together and we could have a conversation. Now that world is feasible even today. And that world is exactly what would happen in an office: the socializing, the conversation, the walk-in, walk-out, open door formats. So all of that is possible if we accept the BBC man as a role model, if we accept the role of technology, and probably save huge amounts of infrastructure costs. That was my bunch of crazy ideas. I would like you to respond to that.
I would divide it into two categories. Again, what you've just shared is very applicable to medium to big size organizations where we are used to having offices and we're used to working in that environment. I work with a lot of SMEs where pure necessity of capital interested in having big offices, and they work just fine. They always have, even before COVID, right? A lot of them will start in their little humble homes, and it works just fine. Second is, you're right. I think you can keep your Zoom open. You can work it like a virtual cubicle. The one thing which I find really works is agreeing clear deliverables. The need of that clarity is more now when we are connecting virtually, because you don't have the luxury to have that water cooler conversation or that coffee conversation. As a lot of bankers will tell you, most of the deals don't happen in office. They happen over that drink. So now you don't have that luxury to do that. So I think trying to make that relationship work virtually is very important. With the team and colleagues, it's about having clarity about what are the deliverables, how are we working through it, being empathetic about what their needs are.
I'm not sure whether personality types play into it, the context of the cultural organizations, in a traditional FMCG sales organization where, you have to gather before a quarter and meet each other and feed off the energy of each other, whether you can replicate that via a Zoom call. So I think there are organizational cultures which are very strong on, face-to-face meetings or face-to-face conversations will struggle a lot more. Coming back to Devu's point about office being a relatively new concept, pre-18th century, we had the guilds where, a master craftsman had apprentices would train I think at some level, the internet is kind of taking us back to that in a new medium. We are learning from master craftsmen, and at some level, because we are following global thought leaders in our various subject domains, also becoming like a Eklavya, Dhritarashtra kind of, Dronacharya kind of, where he doesn't have to actively mentor you. Just because you follow them, you can learn a lot more by osmosis. A friend of mine, classmate from XLRI, she's in Singapore. She said, I see all these talks about post-COVID eras. Do other people know what we don't know? It's not a post-COVID era, but us evolving into a new way of working. Thankfully, employee health and security will be first and foremost, at least for the HR.
A good friend of mine who's also a client, he said diabetes is a blessing. He said, okay, what happens when you realize that you have type 2 diabetes? You eat healthy, you start exercising, you cut down on sugar. Any of these things that you are forced to do or need to do, is it good for you? Is it harmful for you? It is good for you. Now, you didn't do it so far because you never realized the importance of, by not doing it, how you were harming yourself. And I look at this COVID crisis and it reminds me of that conversation about diabetes. Maintaining good hygiene, maintaining social distancing, eating healthy, not getting into overcrowded spaces. All of these things are good for us, healthy for us, and good for the planet as well. So I would actually say that, probably it's a reset of sorts. It is probably a second chance we are getting to continue to populate this planet. So that's my view. I don't know how you would react to that.
There are thoughts that, there'll be a PTSD after this, where, people who have not been able to process this change meaningfully or helpfully, it will impact organizations much later as absenteeism or low productivity. As somebody said, it's a psychological experiment on an unprecedented scale being carried out on 2.3 billion people at the same time.
Yesterday, I was talking to a HR head who said, in the future world, we probably don't need, 100% of our employees now back in office. So maybe, we'll have 40 or 50% back in office. And I'm forced to rethink, why do I need such a big HR team to drive employee engagement now? Because the definition of employee engagement itself has changed. Now, look at the knock-on impact it's going to happen on people and jobs. We're right now talking about recession, job cuts. I do believe that this whole remote working will not only drive us to do things differently, but may need less humans in the job because the machines can do it and offlines can do it. So we need to think about what is not just future of work, but what is the future of our existing roles right now. Even in our way, consulting, HR world, sales and marketing world, today technology will be able to do so much more for you. So some of these jobs are hugely at risk, which were dependent on connecting human to human interfaces and working through technology as an enabler, but not as core. I believe the habits will change, the practices will change, the culture will change, and we need to soon start thinking about what impact it will have on job market and how do we think about the new jobs of the future, not just about working together of the future.
Primarily, I think one of the things that I keep talking about is organizations will need a new kind of job, a communication/facilitation job, which we've been calling over the last 10 years in a small niche of the internet as online community management. Either customer support communities or customer communities or employee communities within the organization. There is a different skill set that is needed for managing online community to have engagement at a high level, connecting people across geographies in tools like Workplace by Facebook and Yammer and now Microsoft Teams. Because these tools are there, but there needs to be a facilitator who helps people make sense of that tool. Like every organization has a different use case for the same tool. The whole problem with most tech tools, whether HR tech tools or these online community tools is people believe that if I just buy the tool, people will use it as it is meant to be used. Zoom wasn't ever made to be used like how it is being used now.
So pre-COVID, I was working on one idea, which has been very close to my heart, and I was hoping that I would launch it right now. And then COVID happened, and I said that okay, it accelerates that launch, which was on we craft jobs imagining a superhuman who's available to fulfill that job. And when I say superhuman, somebody who has all the faculties intact, which is sense, hearing, speech, mobility of arms, mobility of legs. So all of it.
So recruiters call that the blue squirrel.
The blue squirrel. So, can we create jobs for opportunity deprived individuals? So people who have speech impaired or hearing impaired or eyesight impaired, even physically disabled people. And what the COVID crisis is doing is that it is giving us far greater insight. So if you don't have to travel to work, if you don't have to get into an office, the jobs that were earlier performed by a particular kind of people can now be done by a different set of people, and which will drive to much higher retention rates, much higher engagement. Maybe the cost of performing those tasks or jobs would go down dramatically if people don't have to live in city centers. Because commercial real estate for offices is a different argument. Residential real estate, which is closer to commercial real estate, is also priced in correlation with that. But going back to my earlier argument, if I can live in Goa, I'll probably pay maybe 1/5 or even less, 1/10 of what I pay here in Mumbai right now as rental. And therefore, the cost at which I'm willing to offer my services would also go through a dramatic shift. So we need to start imagining or crafting jobs from a lens of what I'm beginning to call as a vital, essential, desirable framework. So what faculties or what human capabilities are vital for a particular job versus essential and desirable. So I see a great opportunity that will get created when you're revisiting jobs. It is good that you revisit jobs from a blank slate and recraft jobs, imagining the shift of performing those activities to different kinds of individuals, working out of different kinds of locations, and also probably re-aggregation or reassembling those in different roles than that have existed in the past.
Again, I would divide it into two and saying big companies versus small and medium companies. There are companies who can afford to do this exercise. And I'm looking at companies who are struggling for survival. So they would do what it takes right now. And this agenda, rightly or wrongly, will wait for them because they want to stand on that. They're not being able to process payroll for whatever limited number of employees they have, leave alone trying to find what is vital. So there is that category which is barely surviving. And of course, there are big companies who are institutions who have seen these crises come and go, who will certainly be in a better position to do that. And over a period of time, they will drive the market towards it. But it will come from a point of view, what is more efficient for me? What is more effective for me? So from that point of view, it will become agnostic about whether you're special needs, you're a woman, you're a man, or you're a person of color, because you really are not driven by the physicality of the people anymore. You're driven by what they're able to deliver to you online. And that would be a good trend, but I think it's more midterm to long term.
What is a managerial role itself will change. As work becomes more and more virtual and online, somewhere I think the acceleration towards the collaborative manager/mentor figure will be much more. How do you go from an individual contributor to a first-line manager role will also drastically change if only 25 to 30% of the people are working in office at any given point of time. Everything that has become a ritual in traditional organizations and large organizations will need to be either questioned or done away with?
I would also add to that, I think, apart from how do you manage the workforce for a manager, in the, let's say before COVID, we were also talking about managing humans and bots together, right? So it becomes even more pronounced in the new world. The thing from a human to human, and we'll talk human to bot, now we're starting to talk about those interactions, is that a relationship will become very important because a lot of these connects are being made online. So today companies are talking about virtual internships, okay, virtual joining. People are starting getting onboarded virtually. I know of CEOs, right? A friend of mine who's now the CEO for Tata Beverages, he's just joined online and he's running the organization without never ever having met his management team. So how do you make these relationship works? Because humans do, deeply work with connects and relationships. So that factor becomes very important. I think in times of working remotely, I tend to believe that over communicating is not a bad thing.
Pre-COVID, one of the biggest shifts was industrial IoT. The, the biggest use case of Industry 4.0 was to drive automation, to put manufacturing on the cloud. And I have worked with clients who have created control towers on the cloud where close to 15 to 20 manufacturing locations around the world is actually run by a team which is sitting in one location. I think we are going to see the shift of in the workplace, in the knowledge workspace as well, where the equivalent of control towers are manufacturing on the cloud are going to come to the workspace as well. Recently, I discovered the innovation which is happening in a very different industry, which is the performing arts. And I observed my wife. She's a big fan of Richa Chadda, and every evening Richa Chadda comes on Instagram live, and she invites a guest singer, and they both have a conversation and perform for the audience, and hundreds of people log in to that. So there will be new models which will emerge. So these are performances of artists performing on the cloud and creating a different kind of an audience. And these are events. They are not paid yet, but I think some of them are getting sponsored. So any topical news that stood out for you that you wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about?
I don't understand the finance world, so basically I'll lean on both of you. What this whole mess about this whole Franklin Templeton mutual funds that is kind of going around. So if you can break it down for a lay.
So basically you should not invest in Franklin Templeton. They're out of money. There is no liquidity. So their bond price has fallen. And if you have any bonds which you're holding for Franklin Templeton, exit. That is basically what it means.
But will it impact the overall mutual fund markets also?
Yeah, it will. So what happens is, see, the way it works is you might have bought a fund. That fund might have bought some units in the Franklin Templeton. So it isn't as simple as have you bought Franklin Templeton. You literally have to check that if you bought another mutual fund which has invested in Franklin Templeton. The only bonds which are holding on is gold bonds. So one news which caught my attention is gold zooming to 82,000 rupees per 10 grams. I mean, it is unheard of in my lifetime. And to me, it isn't just about the gold price. It is telling you something about what humans value, right? Because see, markets are very emotional. And so they believe that, glittering yellow mineral is more precious than any other commodity at that point of time. And so minds are complex to interpret, and markets are even more complex to interpret. Because there is nothing else to invest in, chalo yahi khareed lete hain. And it is that sentiment which is driving the market up and the price of gold. The other news which caught my attention was the TCS one, which I did mention earlier, which is about Gopinath saying
25% people.
Yeah. I think that really caught my attention given their strength and workforce. And, where I'm going with that is if TCS can do it, then anybody can do it.
Right.
No,
The other factor, some people said, so what will they do with all the savings?
I think, what will happen is, Gautam, the business is going to take a beating because all the tech companies are heavily dependent on the US market.
Right.
And so if US is shut, it has a knock-on impact on any of our companies in India. And some of these saves will go towards keeping the companies afloat.
so I would agree that we need to look at it as an action which will lead to lesser job losses. If I were to ask both of you, what should be the next topic which could be of interest during these times?
Blended learning, online versus physical. So in this world where we are saying online education may be the future, the students are willing this year to even take a gap year if they don't get back to college.
Maybe what are the new organizational models that we are seeing? Probably new leadership models. What kind of a leader will you be if you're onboarded virtually into an organization? A CEO being onboarded virtually, what impact will that have? For example, I read this again HBR article which talked about how vision is an overrated skill for a leader. It's in a crisis, the person who holds together, who gives context and meaning to people to work on a everyday basis is much more important than somebody who crafts a grand vision.
Great. I'll take these and I'll include both of them in subsequent segment. That's one part of the equation, but I see it as more powerful that it will create a new organization model which will prepare them for far greater strength for the future as well. So if they can those many jobs into non-location specific jobs, it will make the organization far more resilient for as somebody jokingly said that COVID-19, they will come up with a release of COVID-9 Max Pro, so then you are more prepared or ready for the next crisis that hits you. So I see that as a positive. Great. Thank you so much.
Fabulous conversation. Thank you, Debu, and thank you, Gautam. It's
My
always
pleasure.
a pleasure to talk
Thanks,
to both
Debu,
of you.
for putting this together.